"You're staring at my dress like you're trying to audit it," she said, stepping closer until the string lights caught the gold in her hair. I looked her over once. Slowly. "Occupational habit," I said. "Though I'll admit, this particular audit has my full attention." She tilted her head, fingers brushing the lapel of my jacket. "And what's your preliminary finding?" "Inconclusive," I said. "I'd need significantly more time to be thorough." Her mouth curved. "Good thing the night is young. Before we begin, has someone ever walked straight into your professional judgment and made it completely irrelevant? Drop it in the comments, subscribe, and let's get into it. My name is Tanner Wick, and I make my living reading people before they realize they're being read. There's no badge, no gun, no trench coat. What I have is a forensic consulting license, a beat-up leather notebook, and 17 years of learning that numbers almost never lie, but the people behind them almost always do. I've walked through half-finished data centers at 2 in the morning looking for ghost employees. I've sat across from CFOs with yachts registered under their mothers' maiden names. I know what greed does to smart people, and I've learned to find it in the small things: the invoice dated on a Sunday, the vendor address that maps to a vacant lot, the eye that twitches when you ask a simple question about Q3. I am not cynical. I am precise. There's a difference. I was 38 years old the night this started. No wife, no kids, I travel too much for either. I lived in a rented house on the east side of Austin with good bones and terrible plumbing, and I liked it because the neighborhood was honest. Nobody was performing anything. Austin's startup world was a different country. The evening of May 9th, I drove downtown and parked 2 blocks from the Halcyon Hotel. The air was warm and soft, carrying the last sweetness of the bluebonnets, that particular smell that belongs only to early Texas spring, before the heat burns everything simple out of the air. I stood on the sidewalk and breathed it in, because I knew once I walked through those doors, I'd be back in a room full of people who'd stopped noticing weather. The event was the Spring Founders and Investors Mixer, sponsored by Horizon Capital. The rooftop terrace had been dressed up with string lights, hanging planters, and long marble bars. The drinks were expensive, the appetizers were small, the classic formula for keeping people hungry in every sense. My contact at Horizon was Derek Prescott. Senior partner, easy confidence, the kind of man who said, "quiet," 3 times in a 10-minute phone call. His ask had been simple: we're close to wiring $30 million into a Series B. I want a second set of eyes on the founder before we do. The founder was Mara Holt. Her company was Luminicare, a health tech platform built around personalized mental wellness. The pitch deck was clean, the pilot numbers were strong. My job was to find out if the rest of it held. I stationed myself in the northwest corner of the terrace, back against the parapet, ginger ale in hand, notebook in my back pocket. I looked like someone's quiet friend who'd tagged along. That was the point. Then I found Mara Holt in the crowd, and the job got more complicated. She was taller than I'd expected, with pale blonde hair, natural, unhurried, going almost silver under the string lights and warmer gold where the shadows caught it. It was pinned loosely, a few strands at her jaw. Simple navy dress, slim gold watch, nothing that announced itself. She was the most magnetic person on the terrace, and she wasn't trying. What stopped me wasn't how she looked. It was her eyes. Even from across the roof I could see she was performing sociability while her gaze worked independently, scanning, sorting, reading the room the same way I was. I wrote one line in my notebook: situational awareness. Hi. Then she looked across the terrace and found me. Most people look away when a stranger catches them staring. Mara didn't. Her gaze hit mine with the directness of a spoken question, and she held it, 1 second, 2, 3, long enough that the man beside her stopped talking mid-sentence. She said something brief to him, and then she walked straight toward me. The crowd shifted without her asking. She stopped 2 feet away, looked me over once, and her mouth curved with the slight satisfaction of someone confirming a hypothesis. "You're not a founder," she said. Low voice, warm rasp at the edges. No, I said. Not a VC either. She glanced at the blazer and sneakers crowd near the bar. They all dress like they're about to go on stage. Correct again. Her eyes, gray-green in the string light, were doing exactly what mine were, cataloging, measuring the distance between what I said and what I meant. So what are you? She asked. Calluses on your hands, not drinking. You're here to watch, not to pitch. I took a slow sip of the ginger ale. Maybe I just like the view. Cute, she said. But wrong. She nodded toward a couple near the bar, locked in eye contact while their friends laughed and counted on a phone. See them? They're playing a game. Hold eye contact the longest, you win. She paused. People think it's romantic. And it's not. She turned back to me, and her gaze locked onto mine with a precision that felt like a door opening. It's about dominance, she said quietly. Who flinches first? Who feels seen, and who feels exposed? She let that land. How long can you hold it? I didn't look away. I let the noise blur at the edges and felt that particular stillness, the kind I know from standing on a high beam in the wind, when the body understands that the steel is solid if the mind stays level. You tell me, I said. A slow smile touched the corner of her mouth. The couple who holds eye contact longest wins, she said. You want to find out which of us that is? Behind me, somewhere across the terrace, I heard Derek Prescott laugh, loud and easy and completely unaware. I thought, this is going to be more complicated than a clean read. I had no idea how right I was. I didn't sleep much that night. Back at my house on the east side, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, a cold cup of coffee, and a full Luminicare file spread across 3 monitors. Financial statements, incorporation docs, cap table, vendor contracts, employee records. The kind of paperwork that tells you everything about a company except whether the people running it actually believe in it. I started where I always start, the money. Luminicare's revenue curve was impressive. Too smooth, actually, which is the first thing that makes a forensic consultant slow down. Real growth has friction in it. It stutters. It has a bad quarter after a good one, a client who churned unexpectedly, a month where payroll hit wrong. Mara's numbers read like someone had ironed them. Not fabricated, I wasn't ready to say that yet, but managed. Curated. Presented with a care that went slightly beyond pride. I flagged it and kept moving. The vendor list was long, which was normal for a health tech platform. Software licenses, clinical data partnerships, compliance consultants, API providers. I ran the standard cross-check, business registration, physical address, tax ID. Most of them were clean. But on page 11 of the accounts payable ledger, one vendor stopped me cold. Archway Solutions LLC. 11 invoices over 14 months. Total paid, $412,000. Services listed as, Strategic Advisory and Integration Consulting. I searched the name. No website. No LinkedIn presence. No state business filing I could verify in under 10 minutes. The registered agent address was a mail forwarding service in Delaware, the kind that costs $40 a month and asks no questions. I wrote the name down and drew a box around it. Then I poured the cold coffee down the sink, made a fresh pot, and started on the personnel file. Luminicare's head of finance was a man named Joel Carey. 41, CPA, previously at 2 mid-size healthcare firms before joining Mara's company 18 months ago. His LinkedIn was polished. His references, according to the HR file, had checked out clean. But his hire date was 3 months before the Archway invoices started appearing, and his signature was on every single approval. I sat with that for a while. It didn't prove anything. A finance lead approving vendor invoices was normal. But Archway had no footprint, and $400,000 was not a rounding error. It was a number someone had worked to keep just below the threshold that triggers automatic audit flags in most venture-backed accounting systems. Someone who knew exactly where that threshold sat. I closed the laptop at 2 in the morning and stood on my back porch in the dark, listening to the neighborhood. A dog somewhere. A screen door. The highway a mile off, a low constant sound like the city breathing. I thought about Mara Holt standing at the rooftop railing, reading my hands, reading my stillness, arriving at accurate conclusions with the calm efficiency of someone who had learned to trust her own judgment. I thought about the fact that she might have no idea what Joel Carey had been doing in the office beneath hers. Or she might know everything. That was the job, figuring out which. 2 days later, I attended a public panel where Mara was speaking. It was held at a co-working space downtown, the kind with exposed ductwork and motivational typography on the walls. She was one of 3 founders on a stage discussing scale and sustainability in health tech. The other 2 talked about metrics and fundraising timelines. Mara talked about patients. Specific ones. A woman in her 40s in San Marcos who had reduced her anxiety medication by half after 6 months on the Luminicare protocol. A veteran in Killeen whose sleep data had flagged a pattern his doctor had missed. She cited them without names, with clinical care, and with a quiet fierceness that didn't perform itself. The room listened differently when she spoke. I noticed it the way I notice things, not with feeling first, but with observation, and the feeling arriving later, quieter. Afterward, she found me in the coffee line. "You again," she said. No surprise in her voice. As if she'd expected the city to be smaller than it appeared. "Forensic consultants are everywhere," I said. "Like pigeons." She laughed, short, real, nothing performed about it. "Are you going to tell me who hired you? Are you going to tell me about Archway Solutions?" The name landed. I watched her face with the full attention I'd been trained to give to moments like this, the micro-expression, the breath, the fractional pause before the mask reassembles. What I saw was not guilt. It was not the careful blankness of someone buying time, either. It was confusion. Genuine, slightly alarmed confusion. "What is Archway Solutions?" she asked. Her eyes held mine. Level, searching, carrying none of the deflection I'd been prepared for. I held the look for a long moment. In 17 years, I had learned to read the difference between a person lying to protect themselves and a person asking a real question. Mara Holt was asking a real question. Which meant someone else in her company had a great deal to answer for, and had been counting on her not knowing where to look. I handed her my card. Just the name and number, nothing else. "Call me tomorrow," I said. "There are some things you need to see." She called at 7:45 in the morning. I was already at my kitchen table with the Archway file printed out and flagged in 3 colors, yellow for anomaly, orange for probable cause, red for the things that kept me up past 3. My phone buzzed on the table and her name came up, because I'd saved it the night before without thinking too hard about why. "You said there were things I needed to see," Mara said. No good morning, no preamble. I appreciated that. "There are. Can you get away from the office for 2 hours? A pause. "I have a 9 o'clock with my engineering lead." "Move it." Another pause, shorter. "Where?" "We met at a diner on South Congress, the old kind, with vinyl booths and coffee that came in a ceramic mug and nobody who cared about your burn rate. I was there first." I watched her come through the door in dark jeans and a white button-down, blonde hair down today, catching the morning light through the plate glass window. She looked different outside the startup ecosystem. More real. Less performed. She slid into the booth across from me and looked at the folder I'd set on the table between us. "How bad?" she asked. "I don't know yet how deep it goes," I said. "But I know it's been going on for over a year." I walked her through it methodically, the Archway invoices, the Shell registration, the approval signatures. I showed her the threshold pattern, explained what it meant, watched her face as the picture assembled itself. She didn't interrupt. She didn't reach for her phone. She sat with both hands flat on the table and listened the way people listen when they're building something internal, not just hearing, but reconstructing. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Joel," she said. "Not a question. His signature is on every approval. He told me Archway was a compliance consulting group. Recommended by our lead investor." She looked up. "Recommended by Derek Prescott." I kept my expression neutral. "When was that conversation?" 16 months ago. Joel came to me with the contract, said Derek had used them with 2 other portfolio companies. I signed off. Her jaw tightened. I signed off because I trusted the source. I wrote nothing down. I just watched her work through it, the sequence of how trust gets weaponized, how a clean signature on page 4 of a vendor contract can become the thing that buries you 18 months later. "Prescott hired you," she said. "Yes." "To assess me?" "Yes." Her eyes held mine across the table. No anger yet, that would come later, privately, where she'd let herself feel it. Right now she was still in the clean cold space of understanding. "And what do you think?" she asked. "Now that you've looked under the floorboards." "I think you built something real," I said. "And I think someone decided that made you useful." That afternoon I drove to a records office and pulled everything I could find on Archway Solutions through public filings. The registered agent trail went from Delaware to Nevada to a holding entity incorporated in the Cayman Islands, a classic 3-layer buffer, the kind you build when you want distance between a payment and a name. I almost missed it. On the 4th document, buried in a transferred ownership filing from 8 months prior, the original organizer of Archway's Nevada entity was listed before the transfer, a company called Ridgeline Ventures Group. I sat in my truck in the parking lot and searched the name. Ridgeline Ventures Group. Inactive since last year. One listed principal, Derek A. Prescott. I put my phone face down on the passenger seat and looked out at the parking lot for a while, just a concrete median with a struggling crepe myrtle in it, a woman loading groceries into a sedan. The ordinary, indifferent world going about its Tuesday. Prescott hadn't hired me to find the fraud. He'd hired me to assess Mara, to give him a clean consultant's report he could use to either validate the next round or quietly walk away from the investment before anyone started pulling the same threads I was pulling. If I found nothing, the money flowed and the Archway arrangement continued. If I found something, he'd expected me to bring it to him privately, give him time to manage the story. He had not expected me to follow the paper all the way back to his own name. I called Mara. "I need you to do something before tonight," I said. "I need you to have your attorney pull every original Archway contract from your record system and hold them. Don't tell Joel. Don't tell anyone on your finance team." A beat of silence. "You found something else." "I found where the money was going," I said. "And whose pocket it came from first." She exhaled slowly. "Tanner." It was the first time she'd used my name. It landed differently than I expected, not like a formality, but like a weight she'd chosen to set down in a specific place. "Are you going to bury this? He's your client." The question deserved a straight answer. "He was," I said. Past tense. Another silence, longer. When she spoke again her voice was steady and quiet, the way a building is quiet after the last beam clicks into place. "What happens next?" she asked. "There's a dinner," I said. "Friday night. Prescott, the LP representatives, your key investors." I was already on the list. I paused. "I think that's where this ends." "Publicly?" "If it has to be." She didn't hesitate. "It has to be," she said. I started the truck and pulled out of the parking lot into the soft Tuesday afternoon, the city easy and unhurried around me, completely unaware that somewhere in its glass towers a reckoning was 4 days away. The restaurant was called Ember and Stone. Private dining room on the 14th floor of a downtown hotel, the kind of place where the lighting was dim enough to soften hard conversations and the tablecloths were thick enough to muffle them. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Austin's skyline, the Capitol dome lit pale gold in the distance, the Colorado River a dark ribbon beyond it. On any other evening I might have appreciated the view. Tonight I was counting seats. 12 people at the table. Derek Prescott at the head, positioned the way men like him always position themselves, central, elevated, commanding the sightlines. To his left, 2 Horizon Capital partners I recognized from the firm's website. To his right, a woman named Sandra Okafor, the LP representative from a university endowment that had committed $8 million to the fund. She was 60, precisely dressed, with the particular stillness of someone who had attended many dinners like this and trusted very few of them. Mara sat midway down the table, between 2 other portfolio founders who had been invited to give the evening the texture of a community gathering rather than what it actually was. She wore charcoal gray tonight, her blonde hair pinned back, and she looked composed in the way that costs something, the composure you build not from ease but from decision. I was at the far end, introduced as an independent consultant. Prescott had welcomed me with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The first hour was theater. Prescott ran it smoothly, updates from portfolio companies, cautious optimism about the market, a toast to the fund's 7th anniversary. He was good at this. The warmth felt real unless you were looking for the seams. I ate quietly and watched Sandra Okafor, because LP representatives at dinners like this are always the most important people in the room. She asked 2 careful questions during the portfolio updates and wrote nothing down, which meant she was recording everything internally. Mara spoke when addressed and volunteered nothing extra. We had agreed on that. Dessert arrived. Prescott set his fork down and looked at me from the head of the table with the easy authority of a man calling a meeting to order. Tanner, he said. Since we have everyone here, why don't you share your findings on Luminicare? Consider this the informal close of your engagement. The table shifted its attention to me. I felt the weight of it, 12 people, one long silence, the city glowing behind the glass. I opened the folder I'd kept beside my plate. Happy to, I said. I started with the company fundamentals, revenue integrity, operational structure, clinical data validity. All sound. I watched Prescott's expression settle into satisfaction, the look of a man hearing what he'd paid to hear. Then I turned to page 4. There is, however, a material concern, I said. 11 invoices totaling $412,000 paid to a vendor called Archway Solutions over 14 months. The vendor has no verifiable business operations, no public registration, and no deliverables documented in Luminicare's records. I paused. The approval signatures belong to Joel Carey, Luminicare's head of finance. The table went quiet. Not the polite quiet of people listening, the tighter quiet of people recalibrating. Prescott's expression didn't break. He was too practiced for that. These are internal matters, he said smoothly. Exactly the kind of thing we bring in consultants to flag privately so management can correct course. I appreciate the diligence, Tanner. We can debrief on the specifics after dinner. I documented it, I said. It's already in your fund's reporting system. Time-stamped and filed this morning. I looked at Sandra Okafor. Your office received a copy at 11 a.m. Her expression didn't change. But she set her water glass down with a deliberate care that told me she'd read it. Prescott's voice dropped a register. I think we should discuss this offline. Your ethics policy requires immediate reporting of material financial concerns, I said. Which I've done. In writing. I looked at the other partners. The Archway invoices trace back through 2 holding entities to a company called Ridgeline Ventures Group. Inactive since last year. 1 listed principal. I let the pause sit exactly as long as it needed to. Derek Prescott. The silence that followed had a different quality than the ones before it. It was the silence of a room where something had just become irreversible. One of the partners, younger, to Prescott's left, turned slowly in his chair. "Derek," he said quietly. "Did you know about this?" Prescott's composure cracked along one seam. "What I know," he said, his voice controlled but stripped of its warmth, "is that I hired Tanner to give us a clean picture. Not to air internal matters at a dinner table." He looked at me. "Your engagement is over. If you think you have a career in this city after this, you're dreaming." I kept my voice level. "You can end the contract," I said. "You can't change the report that's already filed." Sandra Okafor cleared her throat. "We will review the material," she said. Her tone was quiet and absolute. "I suggest we keep the remainder of this evening civil." She looked at Prescott with the particular expression of someone closing a door. "The real conversation will happen elsewhere." Prescott's phone buzzed once. He checked it and something in his face went still. It buzzed a second time. He stood, buttoned his jacket with the mechanical precision of a man running a familiar exit sequence, and left the room without explanation. He didn't come back. The dinner continued for another hour, but the temperature had changed entirely. People asked real questions now, about governance, about founder protections, about oversight structures. Mara answered each one with a clarity that had nothing defensive in it. She was not managing the room. She was simply telling the truth, and the room could feel the difference. When the plates were cleared and the guests began filing out, Sandra Okafor crossed to Mara, shook her hand, and said 3 words, "We will talk." The way she said it made it sound like a commitment rather than a threat. I stood near the window and watched Austin hold its position beyond the glass, indifferent, luminous, unhurried. Somewhere in the building, Derek Prescott was making phone calls that wouldn't save him. And across the emptying room, Mara Holt looked up and found me. Neither of us looked away. The room emptied the way rooms do after something real has happened, quickly, quietly, people collecting their coats and their composure in equal measure, conversations dropping to murmurs, murmurs dropping to nothing. Mara and I ended up near the old upright piano in the corner by the windows. Nobody had played it all evening. It stood there with the particular dignity of furniture that has outlasted several versions of the room around it. Austin glowed beyond the glass, warm, unhurried, the May night pressing softly against the hotel's 14th floor like it had nowhere else to be. She exhaled slowly. Long and deliberate, the way you breathe out after holding something heavy for longer than you'd planned. "I think my hands are shaking," she said. I looked at them. They weren't. "They're steady," I said. She glanced down at them as if she needed the confirmation from her own eyes. Then she looked back up at me with an expression I hadn't seen on her before, not the appraising sharpness of the rooftop, not the cold clarity of the diner booth. Something quieter. Something that had stopped performing. "I thought you were going to play it safe," she said. "Send a careful email. Let them manage the story the way they always do." "I sent the email," I said. I just stopped pretending the wall was a good place to stand. She studied my face the way she had that first night, methodically, honestly, looking for the angle, the favor I'd want later, the bill that would arrive after the gesture. I let her look. I had nothing to hide behind and no particular interest in hiding. "You risked your whole career tonight," she said. "Maybe," I said. "Maybe I finally started the one I actually want." Something shifted in her eyes. Not dramatically, Mara didn't do anything dramatically. It was the small shift of a person who has revised an estimate upward and is deciding whether to say so. "How many clients do you have after this?" she asked. "The kind I want," I said. "The ones who'd rather be told the truth than flattered." Her mouth tilted up at one corner. "You know that sounds like a line." "I'm bad at lines," I said. "Ask anyone." She laughed, the same short, real laugh from the coffee line 2 days ago, nothing performed about it. Then it faded into something more serious, and she was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city. Joel resigned this afternoon, she said. Before I even asked. Just sent a 2-line email and went dark. She paused. I keep thinking about the 18 months I spent building the clinical protocols, the hospital partnerships, the team, and the whole time there was a hole in the floor I didn't know was there. You didn't put it there, I said. No, she said. But I handed someone the tools to cut it. She turned back to me. I trusted Prescott's recommendation because I was moving fast and I thought trust was efficient. I thought it saved time. A short, humorless breath. It cost me $400,000 and almost cost me the company. It didn't, I said. Not yet. Sandra Okafor shook your hand on the way out, I said. That's not a gesture she makes toward companies she's finished with. Mara looked at me for a moment. You noticed that? I notice things, I said. It's the job. Is it still the job, she asked. Right now, standing here. I considered the honest answer, which was the only kind I had left in me by that point in the evening. No, I said. Right now it's something else. She turned to face me fully, her back to the window, the city a soft gold frame behind her. Her blonde hair had loosened through the evening, a few strands at her jaw catching the low light of the room. She looked tired in a way that follows real effort, not diminished, but distilled. Like the version of her that didn't need the armor. The couple who holds eye contact longest wins, she said quietly. What did we win tonight? You get to keep building what you started, I said. On your terms. And I get to walk out of here knowing I didn't sell you out. She was quiet for a beat. You keep saying you and I, she said. What about we? The word sat between us, small and exact and heavier than it had any right to be. What are you asking, Mara? I'm asking if this ends when the report is filed, she said. Or if you want to find out what this is when it isn't attached to a term sheet or a crisis. Her eyes held mine, no contest in it now, no dominance, no measuring. Just a clean question with real weight behind it, asked by someone who didn't ask things she didn't mean. I didn't look away. I hadn't found my limit yet, and I wasn't close. I want to find out, I said. She lifted her hand and set her fingers against my jaw, light first, then certain. The touch of someone who has made a decision and is done deliberating. Last chance to blink, she said. I told you, I said. I haven't found my limit yet. She rose slightly and I bent toward her and we met in the middle, which felt exactly right, not one of us crossing to the other, but both of us closing the same distance. The kiss was steady and unhurried, the way things feel when they're built on something solid. Her hand moved to the back of my neck. My arms settled around her waist, not to hold her in place, just to hold her. When we pulled back her eyes were open. So were mine. I think we won, she said softly. We did, I said. We took the elevator down together and walked out through the hotel's front doors into the warm Texas night. The air was exactly what it had been all week, soft, faintly sweet, carrying the last breath of the bluebonnets from the fields beyond the highway. She slipped her hand into mine as naturally as if we'd done it 100 times before, her fingers weaving between my own. I had come to Austin to decide if Mara Holt was safe to bet on. Walking beside her through the warm May dark, I finally had my answer. She wasn't safe. She was honest, and stubborn, and entirely committed to what she'd built, and she had stood in a room full of powerful people and told the truth without flinching. That wasn't safe. That was better. The couple who holds eye contact longest wins. Standing there on the sidewalk with the city lit up around us and her hand in mine, I finally understood what winning actually meant. It wasn't about dominance, or nerve, or who blinked first. It was about finding someone you trusted enough to keep looking at, when everything else in the room was trying to pull your eyes away. And I had no intention of looking away. Not tonight. Not anytime soon. Thanks for watching. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe for more unforgettable stories about love, resilience, and second chances.